Welcome to the Top-Down EV tool. This video will be a quick introduction to how to use the tool, as well as providing a brief overview of each strategy. If you want a deeper dive on the theory of top-down EV betting and a more detailed breakdown of each strategy, we've just posted another video for you that you can watch now. But for now, if you're looking to get started with top-down betting with Betsniper, this is the video for you. So let's just start off with what is top-down betting. Top-down betting uses live prices in the market, which are de-rigged to provide a reference price or estimation for a true or fair price. Once you know the fair price, all we are doing is scanning the market to find odds that are greater than that fair price. The reason why we think the market is a good predictor for fair odds, the whole optimization function of a bookmaker is largely to price events at fair value and then place margins on those bets. Further, we know these are good estimates of fair value as well because we've tracked these over hundreds of thousands of bets, as well as anecdotally placed these bets to make over six figures over the last few years. Now let's take a look at the actual tool itself and how it works. So as you can see at the top, we've got our four different strategies: positive EV, benchmark EV, line out EV, and pick 'em EV. You can select them all and have them appear on the screen at the same time. Then each row will be largely the same. You have your EV percentage, which is how much you would expect to make per unit staked on this bet, the methodology or the tool it's coming from, so line out in this instance, the event information, the selection information, the bookmaker, the odds that you need to be betting it at, the fair odds of the market, and then you can also open up how many books are priced in the market and see where the rest of the market is at, as well as some extra information for you to consider. Then the stake will be based on Kelly staking, and you can set your Kelly multiplier and your bankroll from your settings, and then the action buttons. So we highly recommend that every bet you place, you should track with our tracker, which will automatically result the bet for you if you want, but it'll also tag it so you're able to track your performance across the different strategies. And then lastly, there's some other actions such as hiding bets, sharing bets, reporting stale odds, which can be really helpful to our team to improve the service. And then quickly, I just want to go through the filters as well. So we have global filters for the sports, for the bookmakers, for the EV percentage, the odds you're going to take, when's the match starting, the market type, and how many books are pricing the bet. You're able to also then customize these global filters per source if you want to get custom. And then lastly, we have filters that are for the tools themselves, which we will go through shortly. What we highly recommend is you either use our recommended filters up here, or you build your own presets and save them. Otherwise, you will spend a lot of time playing around with these filters. Okay, let's start with the positive EV tool. So the positive EV tool is one of the more classic top-down betting strategies, and this is using the whole market as our benchmark. And so what we're doing is we're taking the market prices, we then average them, we then remove the bookmaker margin, and that leaves us with the fair odds. If we can find prices in excess of that, that is a positive EV betting opportunity. And why this is a good opportunity is because we're using multiple reference points, which when they're all trying to do the same thing, can be a really good true estimation of price. And this is a common theory known as wisdom of the crowds. With positive EV, you can open up the bet and you can see where the rest of the market is pricing it at, and you can see how it compares to the price you're getting. The more bookmakers pricing a market, the more robust and reliable this fair odds estimate is. Our recommendation is to always try and only bet when there's at least 6 bookmakers pricing the market. That way you can feel very confident that this is a good estimate for fair value. Lastly, there is one specific positive EV filter that you can play around with, which is the max hold. This is essentially how much VIG there is in the market. The more VIG in the market, the more difficult it is to de-VIG the market, but it doesn't have too much of an impact on the results. Our recommendation would be to set this at 8 or 10%. Now let's look at benchmark EV. Instead of using the whole market as our reference point, benchmark EV chooses a singular benchmark to reference off. And what we want to reference off is something referred to as a sharp bookmaker. So the most common sharp bookmaker in the world is Pinnacle. And that's because Pinnacle accept the most amount of bets, they have the smallest spreads, they rarely ban winners, and they also react to news the quickest, which makes them a really good reference point. But they're not necessarily a good reference point for everything. We have found that they're only really strong on match markets and total points markets. Otherwise, for player props, they're not necessarily the best benchmark to go off. For Pinnacle, we also show what the max bet they allow on a market is. And this can be a really good proxy for how confident they are in their pricing. Often the max limit for a market will increase the closer to the match you get. Other well-sharp known bookmakers are Sportsbet for WNBA and NBA player props, as well as Circa for US sports. Our recommendation is just to use our presets here, we're constantly monitoring these benchmarks to make sure they're accurate, as well as monitoring other benchmarks to see if there are other edges we can take advantage of. But you're also able to build your own benchmark, choosing whichever bookmaker you would like, an average of multiple bookmakers, or even a weighted average of multiple bookmakers. And lastly, there are filters available for exchanges. So if you are using an exchange as your benchmark, how much liquidity you need to see, as well as for Pinnacle, you're able to filter on the Pinnacle limits. Now let's take a look at the Lineout EV tool. And so the Lineout EV tool is a bit different to the other tools because the way Lineout works is we're trying to establish a consensus line where the market is at, and then we're using our own player data as well as bookmaker information to price out what those alternate prices should be. If you look at an example here, the consensus line is around 8.5, and with our modeling and understanding of bookmaker data, we're able to model out what we think these prices should be priced at all the alternate lines, and that way we can find values across different lines as well. Now for this tool, we have some custom filters such as the line, which is where you can determine what line you want to be looking at. If you want to look at low lines or high lines or a specific area, you can target that. And then you can also look at line shift. So how many points away from the consensus is the bet. Lastly, let's look at Pick'em EV. So this is a fixed payout product where you get a fixed payout depending on how many over-under lines you pick in a Pick'em. The more lines you play, the higher the payout. But the payouts are different and they don't scale the exact same. And so we're able to calculate what are the true odds we need to beat in order to be profitable for each Pick'em. And that number changes depending on how many legs you include in the bet. All we do is we compare that price to the positive EV price, and that gives us a reference of how much EV we're getting per leg. As the threshold odds you need to beat change depending on how many legs you play, it's kind of dynamic as you build out a Pick'em. So let's take a look at an example. If we play these first two together, you'll see we have a very small edge of 0.24, because the payout is 3.2 and our fair odds are 3.12, which is simply the multiplication of our two fair odds. As you add more legs in, you can see the EV will increase because our difference between the base payout and the fair odds increase. What you'll see between the third leg and the fourth leg is you don't get a big EV bump because the threshold odds for the fourth leg is much lower than the three legs. But what you'll see when you add a fifth leg in is you get a really good bump in EV because the difference between the 5 legs and the 4 legs is significant. But when you add more legs in, you don't necessarily continually increase EV because the 5-leg Pick'em is by far the best value. And so our recommendation is just to stick to 3 legs and 5-leg Pick'ems. Finally, you're also able to filter for a custom leg price if you would like, and then you're also able to, instead of using a positive EV benchmark, you're able to use a singular bookmaker benchmark or a average of multiple bookmakers. So that's a quick overview of the Top-Down EV tool and how to use it. If you want more in-depth information about the strategies behind how to be successful with this tool, watch this video here. Otherwise, good luck and happy sniping.